Today, we're going to be talking about something that I know keeps leaders up at night. If we haven't met as yet, and this is your first time in this space, I am Tanik Easy, speaker, corporate trainer, facilitator, and empowerment coach. And I help organizations train and develop their new frontline and mid level managers by equipping them with mindset, vision, and performance strategies using my proprietary MVP framework so they can lead, coach, and mentor their teams effectively. I want to welcome all of you who are joining right here live on LinkedIn as well as over there on YouTube. I want to welcome you to another episode of Finding Freedom Through Confidence. That is the name of our show, Finding Freedom Through Confidence. But today we are going to be talking about the top three habits, that leaders need to create a better thinking team. But before we get into that, one of the things that we always say is one of the things that we always say here is that confidence is not something that you can pick up from a supermarket shelf. It is actually an ever growing muscle. And we don't build confidence by thinking about confidence. We actually build confidence by doing. So it is action. It's taking that action. It's a muscle. It's just like when you are lifting weights, it takes time for your body to start showing the effects of those weight training. And so your confidence muscle doesn't grow unless you take action. So we have to take action. Good morning and welcome to my good friend, mentor, and colleague, Dr. Marcia. Thank you so much for joining us in the chat this morning. I know that you have a lot you want to share on this topic as we go through. And so I want us to, let me just bring up my presentation as we talk about this habit. What are the habits? And again, if you are just joining me, if you don't know who I am Tanik Easy. Again, I am a speaker, trainer, corporate trainer, facilitator, and empowerment coach. Go ahead and drop where you're joining us from in the chats, whether you're joining us over there on YouTube or you're joining us live here on LinkedIn. Let us know where you're joining us from because I want to shout you out. All right, I'm going to make this bigger and I'm going to put myself in the corner. So, what are the top three habits that we're going to be talking about this morning? What are the top three habits? Well, the first habit is that we're going to teach your team and yourself how to use fear. So let's face it. Let's face the dilemma here that you have given the passionate speech that you should, the motivational speech, but by all accounts that this should light a fire under your team. So why are they stuck? Why is your team stuck? Why are the persons on your team stuck? Well, when the path seems clear to you and obvious to you, it may not be clear to them. So here's the thing. You have talented people, but they seem paralyzed. Why do they feel that invisible wall of doubt and inaction? You can almost hear when you are in that meeting, you can almost hear the silence in the meeting where bold ideas are supposed to be born. And there is a study that was done by Google, and it found that in work environments where there is a lack of safety, nearly 2/3 of employees feel like they can't speak their minds or be themselves. And so what happens is that they just comply. And Dr. Marcia normally talks about this as well, talking about people mistaking compliance, right? People just complying. And so that is something that happens. They just comply. And it's one of the most maddening and frustrating things for a leader. And so let's talk about, and so over the next 3 weeks, what I'll be doing is I'll be sharing on each of these habits. We'll be talking about the 3 key habits that leaders need to create a team that thinks differently. And so the first habit is to teach your team and yourself how to use fear. The second habit is to make learning louder than winning. And the third one is to build a learn it all culture, not a know it all culture. Good morning and welcome, 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 Curtis. So happy to have you with us this morning. But let's face it, this is critical that you help to change the team's relationship with fear. It is critical that we do that we help to change the team's relationship with fear. Because fear in the workplace is primal, it is real. It is the fear of, and so we're going to be talking about some of the fears here today. And so it is the fear of failure. It is the fear of looking foolish. It is the fear of letting people down. And it is the fear of losing your job. And so as we look at this, we want to know that fear is not our enemy. Fear is not our enemy. And many of us think that fear is the enemy. It is actually a signal. Fear is actually a signal that there is something important here at stake. So it is a signal for you. You know when you have a light, something happening, and I'll talk more about that. But it is a signal that something important is at stake. So what you want to do is to teach your team and yourself how to use fear. Reframe fear into momentum. That's the number one habit, is to reframe fear into momentum by teaching yourself and your team how to use it. So let's talk about that for a minute. We want to recognize that fear is not weakness. Fear isn't weakness. It is actually a feedback. And fear gets up in, whether in corporate or anywhere else, fear gets a bad rap, especially in leadership conversation, because we are told in that space and context in leadership that you need to be fearless, you need to be bold, you need to be courageous. But here's the thing, fear is human. To feel fear, it is human. And more importantly, it is informative. It is informing us of something. Fear doesn't mean that it is always a stop sign. Doesn't mean that it is always a stop sign, but it is a signal. It is a signal that something you're doing matters. And so one person says that fear is a mile marker on the road to growth. It shows up when you're about to level up. And so we want to look at fear in this context. Let us look at fear like this, that it is a smoke alarm. So a smoke alarm will go off, but it doesn't mean that there is fire. You probably, if you have a smoke alarm in your kitchen and you are cooking and the smoke is too intense, the fire alarm will go off, but it doesn't mean that your house is burning down. But what it means is for you to pay attention. This is what it is saying. So fear isn't weakness, it is feedback. It is saying, pay attention. This is a marker. This is something that matters. So I want you to stop and I want you to look at it. I want you to pause for a minute and look at it. And so your job as a leader isn't to silence that alarm metaphorically. It is to check what's real. So what is real and how do you respond? Responding with wisdom and not panic. Again, when your fire alarm goes off, sometimes we panic and we think that, especially if the person is not in the same space with you, and I'm talking physically, this person is not in the same space, they panic. But as a leader, your duty is not to panic when fear shows up. When that fire alarm of smoke or that smoke alarm goes off within your context, it is not to panic, because fear often comes with a rush of adrenaline, and and that adrenaline will sometimes cause people to doubt. And so in a culture of doubt, that adrenaline rush, that fear that comes up, that adrenaline that comes up, will lead to paralysis, will lead to analysis paralysis. However, in a culture of belief where a leader has set a tone for a culture of belief, it becomes the power of action. And so we pause, we stop. That's what the stop sign is. We stop, we take a breath, we observe what is happening, and then we proceed. So that is, and that's the acronym of stop. So when the fear shows up, so instead of panicking, again, we stop. We're going to take a breath. We're going to observe what's happening, what's causing this, and then we're going to proceed. And so let's address how the fears, the different types of fears shows up. And what are the different types of fear? Let's talk about how these show up. And the first one is the fear of failure. Ah, good morning and welcome Leslie. Welcome Leslie. So happy to have you with us this morning. And welcome Lisa. So happy to have you as well joining us over here. Panic, fear. Faith takes a breath. Exactly, Leslie. Faith takes a breath. So we stop, and I use that analogy of the stop sign. And so, what are the different types of fears and how do they show up in the workplace? The fear of failure. And this is a silent killer of creativity. It is a silent killer of creativity. So let's think about the last meeting. What's the last meeting that you were in where you asked for ideas? As a leader, you asked for ideas, and silence, silence. And it was just the one or two persons who are always talking, always dominating the meeting. Say something. And it's not because your people don't have any good ideas. It's more often than not, it's because they're afraid to offer the wrong one. Because again, there is a culture of fear, right? A culture of doubt. And so, what are the symptoms? This is how the symptoms show up in your organization, in your teams. Team members second guess themselves, even if they know and they think that this idea or this decision is a good one, they second guess themselves. They wait for someone higher up to validate them before they speak up. I mean, how many of you have ever been in situations like that? You're in corporate and you have something you want to say, but because of the fear of failure, because of that fear of criticism, yes, let's let that fear of criticism and that fear of judgment, they you wait for someone else to validate you or validate your idea before you speak up. And it kills innovation, it kills the creativity, because you have a vision. The organization has a vision, and I want to let us know that the vision is a living, breathing document. Many times when you ask persons about their vision, the vision of the organization, or if you even go into a company and you ask the employees about the vision of the organization, it is on the wall, but they don't own that vision. And because they don't own that vision, again, their creativity stalls, their innovation stalls. And so I want you to ask yourself, as you reflect on this, where in our team are we playing not to lose instead of playing to win? So because of fear, the fear of failure, it's killing your team's innovation and your team's creativity. Where are you making? Where on your team are you playing not to lose? Playing not to lose doesn't mean that you're playing to win. So here's what this sounds like. Here is what this sounds like as you look at the symptoms, as you think about it, as you see it in your team, is that we are afraid the launch will fail. So you have something coming up and your team says we're afraid the launch will fail. So that's what it sounds like. But here's how we can reframe that. Here's a better reframe for that. We're afraid we're afraid a failed launch could damage customer trust. So what can we test now to prevent that? And you see, that is a good reframe because we're taking that emotional fear away and we're asking a better question. We're asking a better question. Let me acknowledge what Leslie says. She said, from our fear of lack of acknowledgement and not being smart enough, we second guess ourselves. Absolutely, we do. We do, because we think that we are not good enough. We think that the ideas that we come up with are not smart enough because others, because at some point in time we may have lost our voice, because at some point in time we may have been constantly judged. But learning how to again reframe that fear into momentum when we are in the context of corporate, it gives us we learn to use it to push our team forward. We learn to use it to start building back or start owning back our creativity. And so that's what we do. What is the source of momentum? Is it our fear or is it our faith? And so, Leslie, the source of our momentum is the power that we get when we turn or when we reframe our fear into faith, into belief, not just faith, into belief that I can do it. Because as I said in one presentation, that belief, when we break down the word belief, we can get be, lie, or be life. And so as we look at this, we are either living in the existence of life, which is truth, that truth, because be is being living in existence. You're being in existence of that thing. So you can be either in the existence of the lie that you're telling yourself or what people have told you about yourself, which causes you to fear, because guess what? Fear is a real and present danger. And oftentimes we misdiagnose anxiety as fear because they are very, 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 very closely related. You get the same kind of adrenaline rush when there is a real and present danger and when there is also anxiety. And so there's a very thin line. And so we may fear failure because of what? Because we have been criticized before, because we are not sure. And so the momentum comes from when we flip that, fear, when we flip that adrenaline of what we term as fear into, listen, I am going to exist in the truth of life, meaning that, you know what, I know that this may not work, but I am going to try it anyways. I'm going to share my ideas anyways, because it's going to keep improving my creativity. It is going to keep helping me to grow. And so the thing is that fear is only fatal, or failure rather is only fatal in cultures where learning isn't valued. Where learning is valued, failure doesn't become fatal. And if we look in the tech companies, that's how a lot of tech companies are born, because they model a culture of try it until we succeed. And so the fear of failure is like driving with your brakes on. You don't crash, but you never reach the final line either. You never reach the final line. So what we want to do is we want to name the fear, and we want to be specific, because a leader in a culture of belief guides the conversation to become more precise. You want to become more precise, just like the example I gave. And so what's the next fear? It's the fear of looking foolish. Again, another silent culture killer. And I remember talking to someone, a manager, and another client of mine recently, and she said, I had a question, in a strategy session, and this was the manager that is, but I didn't want to be the only one who didn't get it. And like, how many of us have ever been in a meeting where we want to ask a question because we don't get it, but we're afraid to ask the question because people are going to look on us sideways. People are going to say, are you dumb? How could you not get that? Or she's so incompetent, or he's so incompetent. And so this culture, when we have this culture of the fear of looking foolish, when this silent culture killer shows up, right? It's equated confusion, right? And so what are the symptoms? What are the symptoms that we will see? No one challenges a bad idea. Again, you have the few people, and we talk about groupthink dominates. That's how it shows up, where you have the two or the three loud people who always talk, always are sharing. And so we allow that to dominate instead of actually asking whether we think it is a bad idea or not, when we don't understand. And so we allow that group thing to dominate, which is just the two or the three persons who are always dominating the meetings. We allow them to dominate, and we allow them to make decisions, then, so to speak, on behalf of the group, when you just nod and go with it. Not because you truly buy into it, which comes here, which is silence is mistaken for buy-in. Not because you truly buy into that, but because you are afraid of looking foolish, because you're afraid that people will say that you're incompetent, because you're afraid of people will say that, oh, what kind of stupid idea is that you are, or stupid question is that you are asking. But it's just like, as a parent, we want to encourage our children, and we want to, as a parent, we want to encourage our children to ask questions, and no question is stupid, no question is foolish, because it brings out, it shows that the person is thinking. And not because someone don't agree with you means that they are a bad person. It doesn't mean that they don't buy into the idea. They're just asking questions for clarity. And so the thing that you want to ask yourself here is, as a leader, is, where are we mistaking silence for commitment? Ask yourself that the next time you go into your team meeting, where are we mistaking silence for commitment? Because it doesn't mean that the team is committed to that idea, but they just go with it. And so when teams stop asking questions, they stop getting better. When teams stop asking questions, they stop getting better. And so this fear is like walking into a party. I mean, any of you have ever walked into a party pretending that you know everyone, just to avoid the awkwardness? Like, if that is what this fear feels like. But accepting that this is your own team, and you miss the chance, as a leader, you miss the chance to really connect and to lead. And so as a leader, you have to create a space for what's called a psychological safety. And we spoke about the studies, and I'm going to share it again, that studies found that this is the single most crucial driver of high performing teams where people feel psychologically safe. It's that this shared belief that you can speak up, you can ask what we term as dumb questions, or you can admit that you made a mistake without feeling humiliated. And so that's how we get to help our teams start to think differently. That's how, as leaders, you teach your team and yourself how to use fear, and we start building a culture of belief, and we start to help them to think differently. Again, I want to pause right here and I want to welcome everyone. If you're joining us here live on LinkedIn, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for putting your thoughts and your comments in the chat. If you're joining us over there live on YouTube, place your comments there in the chat as well. And I will definitely be going through all the comments and answering them and sharing with you how the MVP framework can be used to reframe all of this. Because in the MVP framework, we talk about mindset, vision, and performance. And performance is not just about what you do, but it's who you are and who you're becoming in that space and context. It's being intentional. So it's not just performance, it's not just about the KPIs, it's not just about those financial key performance index, but it's more than that. It's how you're holding yourself and your team accountable. So we continue as we talk about the next fear and how does that show up. So let's talk about the fear of letting people down. And this is not just related to on the outside. This is related to also in your teams, because as individuals, we don't want to let people down. We are afraid of letting people down. But this is actually a hidden burnout trigger. It is a burnout trigger. And so this one it really cuts deep, especially with persons who are high achievers. We become yes people. You are drowning, and but yet you overcome it. You overcome it. You overwork, and this is how it shows up. You overwork and you become a perfectionist because you stay at work late every night just to make up, because you want it to look perfect. You want to seem perfect. You want everything to be perfectly polished. And that was me for a long time, wanting everything to be perfectly polished. But here's how this is going to burn you. It's going to burn you out because it's not sustainable. That people pleasing and that overworking and that perfectionism, it is not sustainable. And we can become resentful in those moments as well, because we are trying to be so perfect and trying to overwork ourselves and saying yes to everything, that we become resentful in the process. We start resenting self, we start resenting even others. Right? And that's where it goes. We want to do that. And we become disengaged because we're exhausted. We become disengaged because we're exhausted. And so overcommitment isn't loyalty. Again, it is very unsustainable. We are going to reach that point where burnout is going to impact us. And when we start burning out mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, because burnout affects every single area of our lives. And then it's going to start seeping into that aspect of your family life, and you're not going to be able to do the things that you want to do. And so here's how this look. This is a very good analogy, I believe, is that this type of fear of, we don't want to let people down, which is the hidden burnout trigger, is that it's like you're carrying you're going on a group trip and you decide to carry everybody's luggage because it looks noble, it feels noble. But you realize that you can't, because everybody's luggage is heavy and it is unsustainable. You're not going to be able to walk around in that airport with everybody's luggage. So let's not overcommit ourselves in the face of loyalty. But let's be realistic in how we commit ourselves, because again, you work as a team, not as an individual. And the fifth and final fear, or the final fear the final fear, not the fifth and final, but the final fear that I want to talk about in this session is the fear of job loss. Like, this is real. Even in this season and context and time, the fear of job loss is real. And this can block the momentum of your team members. And so during times of restructuring or layoffs, you've seen even the most confident teams shrink into survival mode. I remember speaking with one HR director, and you know, people were hoarding information instead of sharing it, because there was a merger that was happening and people had tension. She started seeing the tension on her team members' face. She started feeling the tension when she went into meetings, and people would not say, but you had the water cooler chats that were happening, or the lunchroom chats were happening, but nobody was actually voicing their concerns up front, because they were in survival mode. They were asking, I wonder if it's me next. I wonder how this is going to play out, because again, when mergers happen, oftentimes people are let go and you're wondering, is this going to be me? I don't have a backup plan. And so people start playing it safe. People stop innovating, right? People stop innovating. And so people start operating, instead of being confident, they start operating from a place of survival, right? And so these are the symptoms: the tension in the meetings, the over focus on optics and visibility. No one takes ownership for risk or for change, because, like, I don't want to be that one. And so you want to ask questions, you want to ask probing questions. You see it. And I want to share with you, what does this look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like within the organization, within the context of your team? It's that instead of you may be saying in your meetings, everyone is scared they'll be next, right? They'll be next. And so you can reframe. What you want to do is to reframe that, because as a leader, as a load bearing wall leader, remember that as a middle manager, even as an executive, as a director, right? What you want to do, this is your opportunity to coach your team, to show your team that you care. And so this is your opportunity to coach them in that space and context. And so what you want to do is, instead of saying everyone is scared they'll be next, is you want to try this out by saying, what clarity or context can we offer today to keep the team focused and grounded? Because that's what they want. People don't want to feel anxious. They're going to feel anxious, yes, but how can you minimize, because you can't mitigate the anxiety. You can't do away with the anxiety in totality and the fear in totality. But what you can do is to minimize it and ask clarifying questions, ask questions that will help the team to stay focused, to stay grounded, and offer that support. Let me pause and let me share. Let me see what Curtis is saying here. He says, fear can make us indebted to others through an invisible obligation we have created. That is so true. That is so true, Curtis. That is absolutely so true. I definitely agree with you on that. And Lisa said, anxiety is the result of one of our fears. They all make us feel bad. Yes. Anxiety and fears closely. It is in that same family. It is in that same family. And so when we learn to identify, I drill down and identify those feelings, drill down and identify those emotions, we can actually work on them better. We can actually turn those around. As we said, teaching ourselves how to, teaching ourselves and our team members how to use fear and turn that fear into momentum, into the power of momentum. And so people can face uncertainty, but only when they feel seen, safe, and supported. Again, creating a space of psychological safety, supporting the team by asking, how can we keep the team focused and grounded? Because that's how they're going to feel supported. That's how they're going to feel seen and that's how they're going to feel safe, because they know that they have a leader who is looking out for them. And so fear of job loss is like a fog on a highway. If leaders don't clear the view, no one will hit the gas. So again, as a leader, you create that space, you create that clarity, you allow your team to see clearly. They may not see far ahead, but they're seeing just enough to continue to go on the journey with you, alongside you. And so as we wrap up, we've been talking about the habit of teaching your team. The number one habit that leaders need to create a team that thinks differently is by teaching yourself and your team how to use fear. So that is the number one habit that as a leader that we want to develop. And so let's talk about how this habit looks in action, because as a leader your job is not to eliminate the fear, because that's not something that you can do in totality, but it is to give it a name, a context, and a direction. So your role is to, again, name that fear, specifically name it. What is it that we are doing here? What is that fear? Name it specifically, call it out. Reframe it as a challenge, not as a threat. And this takes practice. This takes practice. You also want to replace blame with curiosity. It's not whose fault is it, because again, we like to place blame, not whose fault is it. But as you create a as you are creating a belief-based culture, the question that you want to ask is, what did we learn from this? Because you're creating a belief-based culture where people will build that space of belief in self and in the team and in the vision, because they're owning the vision. They're not just seeing it on the wall, but they're owning the vision and they're moving towards what the vision is saying. And you want to, and it shows up as into build safety so others can do the same. Build that safety space. Build a space where persons can feel safe, where persons feel seen, where persons feel heard, and help them to do the same. And so the reminder here The reminder here is that the number one driver of team performance is psychological safety. And it starts with moments like this and what you model when it is hard. So, when you're going through the difficult challenges, the difficult situations, how do you model psychological safety for your team? And so, as Elizabeth Gilbert once said, fear will always be in the car. You just don't have to give it the steering wheel. So, fear will always show up at work, fear will always show up in your team. But again, name it, reframe it as a challenge, not as a threat. Replace blame with curiosity and build that psychological safe space for your team. That's how the fear will remain in the car, but it's not driving the team. It's not the one driving the team. And so, what are the questions that you want to reflect on? Here are some reflection questions for you as leaders as you think about this. Is where is fear quietly shaping our team's decision? When something goes wrong, are we asking who is to blame or what can we learn? And the third reflection question that you want to ponder on is what fear needs naming in our next meeting? So if you have a meeting tomorrow, ask yourself, what's the fear that is showing up inside here that we need to name? Is it the fear of losing a job? Is it the fear of is it the fear of letting people down? Is it the fear of looking foolish? Or is it the fear of failure? What are those fear that needs to be named? And you don't have to name all of them all at once. Just one at a time. And the more we build on that, the more our teams will start to trust and to have that belief. The more they will start to think differently because we're now building a culture of belief and not of doubt and not of fear. And so the impact is huge. And organizations with high level of psychological safety see significant drops in turnover and a real boost in productivity. And why is this? Because when the fear of speaking up is removed, all energy gets channeled into innovation and problem solving. So reflect on those. I want to thank you for joining me this morning for another episode of Finding Freedom Through Confidence. I want you to share your comments. And if this helped, repost it. Repost it so another leader can glean from it because you have. And subscribe. Well, here on LinkedIn, you want to follow me for these weekly live sessions that we'll be talking about. On YouTube, you want to subscribe for these weekly leadership conversations. I want to also share with you that the Leadership Growth Equation Tour is open for application. We only have 5 spots that are available in August and September. And if you miss those dates in August and September, then you will be on the wait list for the next session or the next tour when we open up for the next tour. So you want to DM me to book a call to learn more about how you as a leader can bring this into your organization, because on the Leadership Growth Tour equation, we talk about the currency of a growth mindset. That's that's where we take it from. And in that, we focus on the mindset, building the mindset aspect of belief, flexibility, and focus as leaders, and how we will just tie this all in together. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time on another episode of Finding Freedom Through Confidence. Join me next week as we talk about the second habit that leaders need in order to create a team that thinks differently. So until next week, enjoy. See you soon. Thank you again for joining. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.